time passed in the past up to the arrival of the Ring of Fire. But we also have to keep in mind that time is passing after the arrival of the Ring of Fire, and not everybody, not even the allies who think, well, yes, generally what they're creating here is a good idea and we're going along with it, are going to cut all of their lifelines. They're going to be all over the Germanys people who say, yeah, we'll go along with Gustav as emperor. Yeah, we'll go along with the way the state of Thuringia Franconia is being set up. But, and that but is going to be, we're going to have a fallback position. And it's not just going to be nobles who are going to have a fallback position. It's going to be city councils, it's going to be village leaseholders. They're all, for a long time, going to say, we are going to hold out a certain amount of commitment until we are 100 pretty much percent sure that what they're trying here is going to work.
And that could take another 100 years for them to be sure.
They'll probably do it in 50. But the thing is, they're not going to do it in 5 or 10.
No.
And there's a push on the part of many of the authors of the series to have, in my opinion, change take place faster than it's likely to. Now, many changes will take place very fast, and some of them will be irreversible. You can think of an example. I can easily. The restructuring of the educational systems is essentially going to be irreversible. It will not be possible to put the genie back in the bottle of women's colleges. No. They just aren't going to be abolishable. They're too much of an investment on the part of the organizations like the Damenstifte in Quedlinburg that's been establishing them.
Well, and the women themselves are going to resist not letting their daughters.
Yeah, that could be done.
It
that
could
be done.
It would still be difficult.
No, listen, the rule of history, the basic rule of history, if you want to be remembered as time goes on and the centuries pass, if you want to be remembered in history, what do you need to do?
Attach your name to something that's worth a lot of money.
Yes, found an institution. The people who are remembered are plaques on the wall. We have founded this.
Right.
And when you have an institution going, the institution is not going to give up easily. Organizations are
the iron law of bureaucracy.
The iron law of bureaucracy, the sheer power of human inertia. Inertia not in the sense of
physics,
sitting, and not being lazy, but inertia in the sense that once it's founded, it's really hard to get rid of. As anybody who has ever dealt with organizations knows. The other day I was stuck at the Red Cross for 2 hours donating platelets. You sit there with your blood going in and out, and they gave me the young Victoria to watch on their little DVD player that they put on your lap to keep you tranquil while you're doing this. And much of it was on Prince Albert's frustrations when he discovered that the fires were laid and lighted by two different sets of palace bureaucrats, so the room was always cold because they didn't coordinate, that the palace windows were always dirty because two different sets of officials were responsible for washing the inside and the outside, and the inside and the outside never got washed at the same time, that the dinner for King George III's bodyguard was still being laid out every night, even though the man had been dead for 25 years because nobody had issued an order
saying don't make
dinner for the king's personal bodyguard anymore. This is an essential element of all organizations. If it has been established and if nobody thinks to change it, it will just gradually grind on and on and on. So the new schools are organizations, and they essentially will not be changed. There will continue to be a normal school in Amberg, probably for the next 600 years, whether the USE flourishes or collapses. The things that it has started on this kind of institutional level will keep going. So you have this kind of thing. However, just as these things have started, the fact remains that by 1635, these schools are starting their first classes. It's going to be 3 or 4 years before they start turning out graduates. It's going to be 10 to 15 years after that before the graduates are old enough to have worked themselves up into positions of influence. So the rate at which they impact society is going to be much slower. Yes.
But accelerated.
Accelerated, but
it will continue to accelerate
it will
once
continue
it starts.
once it starts. It's going to be that's why I say there's going to be a lot that will be irreversible, but it's not all going to happen immediately. And of course, having it happen immediately is what a lot of story writers want to do, because they want their particular little piece of quartz to be the light shining in the darkness that brings illumination to the people who were sitting there in the shadows, like Plato's poor guys with fire flickering behind them. Everybody wants to be the light bulb.
That's one problem I have with a lot of the stories that I read in Slush. The brilliant uptimers are going to lift the downtimers out of the doldrums of ignorance. There's not a lot of ignorance running around in the downtimers. They just may not know about television, but I don't think that's a bad thing.
Well, let me say, there are as many ignorant downtimers, proportionate to the population overall, as there are ignorant uptimers in the United States today. In other words,
exactly.
You have a certain proportion of the population always that's oblivious to what's going on around them, whatever it may be.
But they're not stupid compared to uptimers.
No, they're just the same, pretty much bell curve distribution
exactly.
of people who are around and available. Who was it yesterday who was calculating the number of people in the Germanies overall and figuring there were probably available in the Germanies enough genius level minds larger than the entire population of Grantville, from the elderly down to the children
exactly.
who were transferred. And the thing is that not all of them will find Grantville inspiring. Some of them will find Grantville quite horrible and devote that genius to complaining about every single thing that is introduced. And we haven't had very many of those accounted for in the stories yet. There's been a tendency to make villains really villainous.
Instead of just
There's also-
skeptical.
There's also a very powerful tendency on the part of a lot of us to write stories that are by and large pleasant. And it's very difficult to write a pleasant story that features someone whose ethics and whose substantial philosophical beliefs are offensive to you, you know, and you're absolutely correct that there will be those people. It's really hard to write stories about them.
It is, yes. But nevertheless, they will be there, and they will be a resistance
Mhm.
to what is coming along. Now, of
Do
course,
you think they're gonna take up arms?
I doubt it very much, because most of them will not be associated with militant organizations. And you have to keep in mind that many of them will also not be directly arguing against the new ideas introduced by Granville. Many of them will go back to continue doing what they did in their own days, which is arguing with one another about things that have absolutely nothing to do with what Granville introduced.
Angels and pins.
David Carrico's doing music this afternoon, and I brought him a book to look at, and he delved into with fascination. It's called Worship Wars in Early Lutheranism.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
In which it covers the disputes from the 1530s into the 1630s, intra-Lutheran, about how to do liturgy, this type of thing.
What music is appropriate.
What music is appropriate, yes. These, of course, still go on.
Oh, yes.
But,
not just with Lutherans.
But, you know, basically, this is one thing.
Exactly.
Yes, Granville is going to have a tremendous impact, but there are going to be among those millions of downtimers a lot of people who go right on arguing with one another about other things, completely ignoring what is going on behind, because they're just not interested.
Because what's really important is whether or not there's a comma in the second sentence of the confession.
Yes, yes, it's really important whether there should. Remember, I've had some of these people, Bernhard of Saxe-Weimar, you think of him as a military leader, but he is saying, and I am completely committed to the unaltered Augsburg Convention, which means the one that was adopted in 1630, not the one that was revised by Philip Melanchthon about 15 years later, which was regarded by someone like Bernhard as having was being doctrinally wishy-washy toward the Calvinists.
Slightly heretical.
No, not heretical, just wishy-washy.
Wishy-washy.
Allowing for wiggle room where there should be no wiggle room.
Laura
Runkle.
Runkle tells the story of being in the basement of the Presbyterian church in Cedar Rapids, where she lives,